Hi, this is Dino Soldo. I'm a musician, a multi-instrument guy. I also play the electric wind instrument, the Ewwi. We're going to go through every model Akai has ever released. Are we on? This thing may look like a Class II phaser weapon from Star Trek, but it actually goes back 50 years or so. 60 years? In the 60s, the trumpeter and inventor Niles Steiner came up with the idea of a synthesizer that you can control actually like a horn. He'd eventually call it the Steiner horn or the electric valve instrument because he fashioned it after a trumpet with its valves and its various positions. In the 70s, while selling it out of the back of his car, he ran into Francis Ford Coppola at a studio, and he performed the soundtrack to Apocalypse Now, which was just one of the greatest soundtracks ever. Seemed like a ton of musicians wanted one after that, and the prototypes started popping up everywhere. As a teenager in the mid-'80s, I saw Michael Brecker play a prototype of this version, and it just blew me away. A few years later, Niall teamed up with Akai, and the first mass-produced model was born. I got it the day it hit the shelves in the music stores, sort of to get the strap on better. Anyway, this is the Akai 1000 controller, and its 2000 module right here. Let's go through the features of this model and most every other model to follow later. Through the back of the first one, the glide or portamento was located right here next to the touch plate. The bend plates haven't changed. They're in the same position from where your thumb is. There's a bite sensor that also triggers a variable seesawing of pitch. I like to shake it. Some people like to bite it. I found that shaking it kind of extends the life of the mouthpiece. There's an auto-tune function, a transpose function, 8 full octaves for sending notes. They get modified through the breath sensor. I believe it was an analog sensor at the time, and it was switched to a solid-state sensor. Solid-state sensor. On the module, we have 2 oscillators, saw waveforms, square, triangle waveforms, and any combination. Well, a few combinations. It has an independent amp, envelopes, filters, and breath adjustments. On this one, we have a formant filter that Steiner invented, and it's really famous. It kind of mimics violins, violas, cellos, somewhat double reeds. Let me play some. There's no other sound like it. There's also several slots for triggering MIDI notes. I think there's 12 or 14 slots. I could be wrong. I can check, but I'm just going to say it's 14 right now. There's MIDI out. No MIDI in, I'm afraid. Patch changes were done either in increments from a pedal, or you had to change them manually. You just had to do it mid-performance. You had to just, Even the best of us had to bend down mid-performance and do it. On the first model, you kind of blew over it a little bit. You get these spit rivers that would come down. It was kind of gross. This model is about 30 plus years old. The breath sensor has never been changed. And I got to tell you, it holds up really well. I set up the computer as best and as fast as I could because we're going to perform a test. There might be something I might have missed, so in the spirit of scientific disclosure, there may be something off, but here's what I'm finding. Okay, these are just real quick tests. I like saw waveforms, so I chose a saw, put 2 oscillators on and sync them together, and here's the sound of the saw with the full frequency affected by breath. I've always loved the sound of that oscillator when it's opened all the way up, and the filter is just really, really musical. Here's a look at what kind of power we have through a graphic EQ. You can see the waveforms going up. Been a long time since I played on this model, forgive me. And with the volume turned all the way up, here's the sound of the noise floor on the 2000 plus 3 dB. Somewhat gritty and noisy, but I've heard much, much worse. Also, I recorded a software plugin with the lowest buffer size I could do. The 21st century is being real kind to this unit. Here's what it sounds like. The Ewwi module is left, and the software is right. Thank you, Tom Scott, for that lick. The attack is all the way down, and I included no mapping filter for the breath. That's exactly what you hear right out of the box. Compared with true control voltage, real-time playing into an analog brain, you know, it's no doubt that MIDI is not keeping up that well. But I gotta tell you, for the time, it performed extremely well. Control voltage is so fast, you can even growl into it. Let's hear those growls again. Here's the ES2. And the control voltage response from the Ewwi. As fast as they're processing virtual instruments, the Ewwi module in its original version still kicks. Growl, snarl. Up next, the Akai Yui 3000. Ooh, it's so light. I hope I don't drop it. I was thinking of selling my first model in order to get the 3000, and that would not have been the best gear move. It is its own beast. It really is. It has its own personality. It's its own thing. It featured a MIDI in. Can you see that? MIDI in? I was so excited to have my hands free from the controller, and that was the real mistake. Playing directly into the sound module, it was still far superior to MIDI. I remember being frustrated by the sound in MIDI. It would have these zippering notes and sort of steps as you're going up and down in volume. And you can really hear certain modules respond to that, although they're getting better. Nowadays, you can barely tell. It included a visual monitor, which was really helpful. Before I'd play, I'd calibrate breath settings and pitch bend and matching them to MIDI slave gear. I really missed out on the data slider. Boy, that got on my nerves. But it wasn't Akai's fault. It was at that height of the early 90s where buttons and sliders sort of took a back seat to visual design. It now had 4 VCOs, 4 oscillators performing at the same time, or not, 2 VCFs, and 2 amps, and 2 EGs, envelope generators. Pretty much 4 monosynths. You could actually blow through the instrument and escapes into the bottom, which was a much quieter experience, and I loved it. If you got used to the 1000, you sort of got used to that closed diaphragm, though. You'd sort of just play off of the air that's inside your mouth cavity, and you could just breathe through and play these sequence lines forever. But you could do the same thing on this. It has enough resistance to make that workable. Wow. All right. I'm defixing my fix, and I'll tell you why. I was really frustrated about the soft material of the mouthpiece. If I got too excited, I'd close off air to the controller. I fixed this by cutting a small tube of garden dripper, and I just put it inside the mouthpiece. Like that. I can't even do it now if I try. And I still love the smoked metal finish on this. It's so cool. I love it. You know, Brecker, he's painted his purple and red, and this one, it really just, it's nice. The module was less wide, which meant the obvious thing, you couldn't rack it at all. Gigs around town, it was great because you could just put it in a duffel bag or a backpack with some pedals and you have a rig good to go. And there were a lot of things that competed for desktop space back then, and that was one of them. It was great just having it in front of me all the time. One more thing about the 3000. Because of those 4 oscillators I mentioned, you could actually program 4-part harmony. Sort of laborious, but hey, you have chords without MIDI gear. The mighty 3000. Yeah, and of course a MIDI test without any mapping or curves. Let's do some extreme tonguing, see what happens. If you're an Ewwi player and you play progressive rock, this would be your beast. It's the new Akai 3020. It was new. And it was white. And it was white. Hashtag Akai so white. It went back to a design of maybe 10 years ago. The Akai white with red logo. But nothing really changed on the controller that much. The module, something different. All right, let's go through the features, shall we? Just plugging it in, having the same settings. It has 2 VCOs instead of 4. Let's go through the features, won't you? Am I gonna mess up your... Where's my finger? Is that it? Am I massaging it virtually right now? The sound features change again. Now you have 2 VCOs. 1 VCF, 1 VCA, 2 envelopes. I mean, it makes it its own beast again. It's quite different from the other modules. Another improved feature was the modulation routing system. It still retains the Steiner-esqueness of the previous models. Still growling. Okay, the 3020M with all the settings still the same, all the same inputs, and the volume turned up. Here's what you get. And of course the MIDI test, same test as before, nothing's changed. Still a slight delay, but I can't tell any difference between this one and the 3000, really. Sort of don't get the same volume, however. I noticed several times I had to reach for that master volume knob a couple times when I switched to this model as compared to the previous versions. Actually, the first model was a little lower. The second model is just amazing. And this one just kind of goes back to that, the noise threshold is down more considerably than the first model. They did put it in a 2-rack space case, though. It makes it the heaviest ever, but it shouldn't matter too much if it just lives in the studio like mine does. By the way, there's a mythical unicorn version out there. After this one, they put it in a new chassis and a new color. It's like this blue version. It's really nice. There's also a sampled PCM type, 3030M. It'd be great to get if you're the collector type. We'll get more to samples later. Into the 21st century with the 4000S. Wow, what a massive change. Self-contained module inside, battery-powered, internal sound module based on a physical modeled Steiner analog engine. Gives you that famous Steiner Foreman filter again. Also simultaneous control change signals, CC signals, that you can assign from the breath. You have a much needed assignable sustain button, an octave button. The program change feature also sends MIDI, which is great. Multiple ground plates, so you don't get ungrounded. Maybe I should talk about this. In all Ewis, you just have touch plates. You don't have buttons. No buttons, no clickety-clickety-click unless your finger makes it. And what's the advantage of that? Each note is assigned a certain step in voltage, and it tells the sound modules to behave accordingly. How that trigger is sent down is your body makes a connection from this post to this ground plate right here. Your technique goes as fast as electricity can go. Now, the nice thing about this model is now you have two ground plates, not just the one on the thumb, but you have one right here as well. You know, if you're playing and you need your right hand, you can do something and it's not going to lose ground. If you don't have that ground plate, let me see if I can play it. Nothing happens. It just goes right down to the bottom note. There's still the fine-tuning of breath, minimum and maximum of breath, the vibrato, and the bend and glide sensors. The knobs are located up here below the mouthpiece, and they've shrunk in appearance and in performance, unlike this nifty thing here, which has great knobs. But as you can see, I just marked them with white paint so I can see where they are. Can I put that close up with the thing in there? Can you see it? Are you... Can we talk about tweaks and tricks later in the video? With all the benefits of the controller and the sound module merged, may not seem fair to give it a sound test that we did before with real analog equipment, but let's do it anyway. Okay, this is the software inside the 4000 controller, and I'm going to test it just as I tested all of the hardware models, and you see for yourself. Talking to the module, it still feels like CV. And now the MIDI response test. And now the tonguing test. You can still growl into this thing. Cool, huh? I don't think I've ever recorded those sounds, but I definitely have used those sounds live, and I love it. The controller married to the software, it performs just like a control voltage hardware Ewwi. It's amazing. Up next, the flagship model, the Ewwi 5000. What? Okay, the new features. Though I'm not doing it right now, you have the option of wireless audio. Wireless fudging audio. No more pooping AA batteries. Was that too silly? And why is that? Because of this little place right here. Do you see it? High speed, high resolution MIDI. Also, a rechargeable battery inside, charged through USB. Unless you're going through a modular box, USB goes to your computer now. But that means no more zipping, high speed, high resolution MIDI, right down in through the plug. And while I'm at it, might I add the amount, the dearth of plugins that you can use through your computer that make this Ewwi sing. No more nerd talk. That's a lot of models for such a niche audience, huh? I'm taking a break. Am I too silly? Uh-huh. I don't believe you. Just one dial for the breath adjustment now, and a filter adjustment, which I think is kind of cool, although I miss all the ways you can adjust the breath. So the sounds. That organ sound is really cool. Unless I'm doing something wrong, the gain structure is down considerably, and I have it at 99 right now, which is the loudest it'll go. And the Sonovox samples are great. It's based on a sample-based sound engine, which has gigabytes of information inside it, which is a first, and it really sets it apart from all other Ewis. Based upon the good work that they did, the 3030 is now a museum piece. There's one challenge about this: playing live and accessing sounds fast. While I have faith that they'll fix this problem very soon, I'll just show you. When the samples are loaded, they're amazing. And it really, really is a good Ewwi to have if you're an emulation-based wind synth player. I mean, it's lovely. But this horn is great. It's very much needed in high fidelity MIDI, and in emulations it really fits a corner and kind of puts another pillar in the pantheon of Ewwi lore. There's one left to talk about: the EWI-USB, at a price at about half of what the flagship model is. Because I've used it in pro occasions. Usually I have complex setups. For lack of a better word, this is a good entry-level USB Ewwi controller. Strictly controller, no sounds inside. It's kind of slender, going back to the old Ewwi days, but it's got the standard 4,000 and 5,000 mouthpiece. That's a good choice and a good decision. You don't get the full octave range, or, well, we'll see the octave range right here, or the glide buttons or the sustain buttons. Where were they? They're right there. Right there. It's just a great controller to throw in my suitcase for hotel rooms. Have a controller ready to go. Maybe your rig is very complex and it takes more than a few patch changes to set up one type of performance or sound. This is a good solution for it. Please treat them as if they were a real horn. I've assumed a couple times, well, plastic, it doesn't need a case. I just need to put it in my bag, in my suitcase, but that doesn't really work. It needs its own case, and it'll thank you for it. Yeah, this is safe. Oh, all right. No, this is not working. Thanks for watching it. I hope you're able to choose a model or just go down memory lane with me. And I'll talk to you later. Hey, I think this is going to be on my channel. So, Frank, subscribe if you want. Please be nice. Bye-bye.